Hi, I'm Jim.
And I'm David.
And this is the Practical Guitarist Podcast.
The podcast for people who eat, sleep, and breathe guitar. It's the moment you've all been waiting for. Rules to our Great Lakes Guitar Pickup Giveaway. In cooperation with Great Lakes Guitar Pickups, we've got free pickups to give away. Jim and I will be demoing the pickups as long as our promotion goes on for it, and it's supposed to last for an entire year. Make sure you're watching and sharing the videos with interested friends. I mean, who couldn't use a set of killer guitar pickups, right? So here's how it's going to work. First, on February 11th, a special word will be posted on Great Lakes Guitar Pickups Facebook page. A second word or phrase will be placed randomly within the episode of the Practical Guitarist podcast that is released on February 11th. Combine both of these words and send us an email with them. All who respond with both words will be entered into the drawing. Also, once you win, don't bother entering again, as you will not be eligible going forward. Make sure you tell your friends. Hi, Jim.
Hi, David.
I heard you were at a Super Bowl party this evening.
I was.
Did you eat a lot of garbage food, lots of grease?
No. So I had 2 pieces of pizza and 6 wings, and I still feel like I'm bloated.
I had Wendy's this afternoon. I did not watch the Super Bowl. Could have cared less. I do have one thing I want to discuss. We were talking about your notes before this episode began, and I think it would be remiss if I did not bring this up at the start of the episode. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring it up now. I was having a conversation with it was not in the group or anything, but it was with Jeff Biesiadecki, who works over at Good Time Music on Facebook, and he was saying he posted some meme about the halftime show and like how bad Maroon 5 was or whatever. And I've seen mixed.
I
reviews.
want to talk about that.
I've seen mixed reviews, but I commented and I said I don't really. I go out of my way not to watch the game, and I said I actually spent a good chunk of my afternoon playing Megadeth and Living Colour songs. And it was kind of funny because I was looking at he commented back and then he says, I don't understand how they're so popular. And I was like, wait a minute, is he talking about Maroon 5 or is he talking about, Megadeth and Living Colour? And then he goes back and he says, no, Maroon 5. And I responded and I thought my response was funny, but I think it's very telling. And I think it's something we could probably discuss at the top of the show. But of course I'm going to think my own jokes are funny, right? It's like my shit smells like roses and all that stuff. There was an Outkast song about that. Roses smell like poo 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 or whatever.
Yep.
Anyway, they probably do. Anyway, my comment to him was that the reason that Maroon 5 is so popular is because they write songs that you can hum and you can memorize within like 30 seconds. And then it's like you heard them your whole life. And then the lyrical material, the actual like song that goes along with it, that portion of the song, since it's not a piece of music, it's a song, so it has vocals. Is more like it's cookie cutter. It's less controversial. They sing about things that everyone loves, like many pop tunes. They sing about love and those kinds of things. And
are you talking about Maroon 5?
Yeah. I don't see them singing about something controversial like. I don't know. I'm going to throw this out there, and I know that they would never sing about. No, they would never sing about this, but I'm going to say it anyway. And it's like I'd never seen Maroon 5 come out with a song going against the Me Too movement, or something like that.
Right. Or taking a controversial side of things.
Anything like Maroon 5 is not going to come out in support of President Trump, for example. Like, no, you know what I mean? Like they're going to play it safe, and they're not going to talk about any of those topics in their music, because they want to have universal appeal.
So I watched the Super Bowl today, and there were 2 things that were obvious. First, the rappers were lip syncing all the way through. And they did such a bad job that they made sure that they held the mics like this. So they
were covering the microphones.
Well, when you've got 2 of the same voice coming out in 2 distinct, like 2 takes of the same voice, it's obvious that it wasn't like a chorus effect or something like that. And
they got to double that shit.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. Yeah. It would have been the greatest job of bad doubling by a computer I've ever seen, which goes along with the commercials. But hey, we're not a Super Bowl commercial podcast because the TurboTax commercials were just, oh my God, you're not a real boy. Anyway, so
wouldn't know, didn't watch.
Yeah,
too long, didn't read.
I know, right? And so the thing that I'm getting at is though, Maroon 5 was obviously playing live, and he was at the very least singing live. Now, while it's a possibility that they choreographed the music, I don't think so. It's possible, but I just don't think so, because if they did, they could have just left him without a guitar and he didn't have to play a solo because somebody else could have mimed it for him. But you could see where his fingers were, and you could see he was moving, and it was good. And you could tell that he was like, out of breath. Like every song he was like, oh, whoo, and then going back to it and doing his thing, and it was there. So love Maroon 5, hate Maroon 5, piss on Maroon 5, all you want, but I'm going to give them the props, the fact that they did a live show at the Super Bowl. So.
Well, I know Robert Jackson was commenting that, he was kind of impressed because I guess Levin was actually playing guitar.
Yes.
And was like actually playing guitar.
Yeah.
But for me, like gold standard of Super Bowl shows is probably Prince, even now.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll give you that.
Killed it.
I'm just saying that if you're going to slam on a pop act on their Super Bowl show, slam on the ones that were lip syncing, slam on the ones that Red Hot Chili Peppers. They just shit all over the fans with that.
Yeah.
They didn't even try. So,
right. I mean, I loved in the last couple of Super Bowls, the ones that I actually have watched on YouTube later. I don't watch the game.
Yep.
I think I've watched one Super Bowl in my entire life. Anyway, I watched the Tom Petty one, which is really good.
Yep,
and
that was a great one.
The Prince one. Those are the two that stick
The
out.
Michael Jackson one.
Michael Jackson, of course, everybody's seen that one, but
that was
and
the
Janet Jackson. No, I'm kidding. I actually have not watched the Janet Jackson one. So.
I was watching it with my kid.
I'm sure you were watching it live, and then it happened, and you're like,
no, I went
his eyes like.
Yeah, my kid. I think Steven was 4. I think the twins were 4, and because I think I want to say it was 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. That's why they had the 8-second thing, because you could tell that they didn't bother to take the lyrics that the first rapper came out with, and take the swear words out. So they blanked the whole thing. They just bleeped the whole thing.
Well,
and of course they got an 8-second delay now, so they got all kinds of time to do that.
You know what I hate about the Super Bowl halftime show, and I'm going to say this, and I want everybody to take it to heart and yell at me in the group. Why the fuck if you're playing, like, okay, so let's say Prince gets the Super Bowl. He's obviously dead. He can't. But if he gets the Super Bowl halftime show, I don't want to see Prince and 24 other fucking people, right? I want to see Prince's band. That's it. I don't need to see Tom Petty have like, Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins come out and do half the song. Like, what the fuck? And then you're telling me like Maroon 5 performs, they got rappers coming out who guested on the album or whatever. Like, fuck that. I didn't pay to see that.
I think it's because it was local Atlanta talent. Somebody told me it was local Atlanta talent that they put up there. So it was 2 local Atlanta rappers that they had up there. They weren't any good, but that's beside. Anyway. Whatever. I'll just give Maroon 5 props for doing it live. Whether I mean, and the way I could tell, because he was not quite in tune in the beginning. He didn't quite
honestly, they would be the band that I figured would not want to do it live. Like that's
right.
So I'll give them that. But at the same time, like I wonder what time it will be where they get sophisticated enough that like they know people think they're lip syncing, so they're like sitting there with the auto tune, like fucking it up.
Yep, exactly. That was what the rappers were doing. So anyway, I have some notes. So why don't we start? Why don't we start with why don't I throw you a low ball, a low?
You're trying to make me feel bad.
So as we already have taken apart the Acoustasonic, I saw Henning Paul posted his video on the Acoustasonic where he said the same thing. He said, I don't even need to play it. It's $2,000. And I saw Andrew, he said the same thing we did. saw Anderson's video. I'm not impressed enough to pay $2,000 for that thing. You couldn't give it to me for 2,000 or, you know. And what he said was the same thing as we did. Mexican version for under 600, maybe, but definitely not 2,000. He also made a couple points out that Fender has walked backwards. He said, this year, I guess they've got the new Fender Mustang LT versus the GT. Now, I don't know if that's out yet or if it's, but they do have like a little one, like the old 10 watt or 20 watt amps that they had for a while. And those are there. He said, I hope he hasn't had a chance to play one yet, but he said, I hope that they are going to come and, a step forward, because from the GT, which was a good amp at the price range or price point, they really stepped back. The Mustangs were really good, and then they made a step back to GTs, which I agree with him there. And then lastly, he said couldn't touch. And I saw this and I was like, I can't believe this either. So they had a bunch of their custom shop stuff that they had sold to dealers. Obviously, they sell them to dealers, right? Then the dealer is going to sell them. So and they were red roped. And he said this to the Fender rep. He goes, "You have a red rope around these?" And the Fender rep was like, "Yeah." And he says, "But Gibson let me touch everything." He said, "Yeah, but these are sold to the dealers already. We don't want
but like that, then that's the thing. Like Fender should have never brought guitars that were sold to NAMM. What the fuck is the point of that?"
Well, I guess they have a Wednesday. See, that's the thing. Remember we were talking about NAMM and how they should start making things up. I guess Fender had a Wednesday thing where they let the sellers, buy stuff. So now there's a whole wall. It wasn't just some of them. It wasn't just like, okay, here's 8 or 10 of them. It was every single custom shop.
So the rule on that is they cannot take the guitars.
No, not to individuals.
Even to distributors.
That's right.
They have to be shipped.
Right. They have to be shipped, but you should never put them on display.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, you know that a lot of those kind of deals that go down at NAMM are like the store owner being like, "Yeah, I'm buying this for my store." Wink, wink.
Yeah,
it ends up in their private collection because
NAMM
bills are like ostentatious.
Yeah, somebody would have put like 110. I'm willing to bet you there was close to 100 guitars on that shelf.
Yeah,
on that wall. It was a big wall of guitars, and every one of them was sold.
Yeah. So I'm not going to get mad at them for doing that. If they're bringing guitars that aren't pre-sold, see, they're bringing pre-sold guitars because I know that's what Carvin Kiesel does. They bring a lot of pre-solds, which I just kind of shake my head and I'm like, so you're bringing a customer's guitar, and if it gets fucked up, then you have to build another one. That means, like you stop and you think about that for a minute. And you're like, you're a dick. You shouldn't do that. I mean,
well, yeah,
they got a showroom. Grab the shit out of the showroom.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. And Fender's right there. It's not like they got to drive a long ways to go get some guitars.
Yeah,
from the custom shop. Come on.
Well, I think part of the reason why Carvin Kiesel wants to do it that way is to prove like these are actually guitars we built for customers, and this is what they look like. We're not trumping things up to make things look better,
Right.
And that I kind of understand, but then there's got to be some insurance risk on their side, and they should be contacting these people before they go and say, "Hey, would you like your guitar featured?" Damn.
Well, I understand it, and this was Henning's thing. So he said, and I get it. He said, "Yeah, if it had been bought by the end consumer, this was his point. If it had been paid for by the end consumer, and it was already to the last person who was going to own it, he gets it." But every one of those guitars was going to wind up in a dealership somewhere.
Yeah.
And so to say, "Oh, well, these were already spoken for," and then say, "Oh, well, you can't touch them." Well, what am I supposed to do when I get to the dealer? I can't touch them there either. And that was his thing. He goes, "These guys need to realize that the person that's paying for them and then he points to the camera. He's like, "It's you. You're the one buying these guitars.
Yeah.
You're the one that it's the end. And you want to hear and see and get them. And instead, I've got to stand 3 feet behind a curtain or behind a rope."
I think Fender is embracing the new sales model, which is that we're not going to be putting guitars in retailers' hands to get your hands on them. They have doubled down on selling guitars online. That is their mission now, and they're going to continue to do it. And so this is basically, I mean, I don't think this is necessarily completely related to that, but the whole idea that like they're kind of embracing the fact that, you know, you may not get to touch that $3,000 guitar before you buy it.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous in my mind, but
I think it is. I think there are those that you still have to go to that are people like me. You know, the people that've got $3,000 in their pocket to spend on a guitar, typically people that have had a little time under their belts, they have some money in their pockets. They're the ones that are going to go out and spend $3,000.
Yeah, or they're a pro of some sort, and they know that's what they need, and so they're just saying like, "I'll pay it." But that's the thing, like, even if you're that guy that's got the $3,500 to go buy a Les Paul, you know, I still think if you got $3,500, what's the extra $200 to make sure you go to a dealer that has the one you're looking at,
right?
And finding because even if you have to drive, you know, 200 miles to get there, and that's why like Sweetwater, I think for the Midwest at least, is an excellent way to do that because you can see the guitar online, so you know what it's going to look like when you get there. And then you can go there and you can actually have them bring that guitar out to you and try it. And if you're looking for a $5,000 or $6,000 guitar, like that's the way to go about doing it.
Yeah. It isn't unheard of for people to fly to the guitar.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people like, oh well, and this one's come up recently. I think even on the show where like they trust the dealer and they're like, oh well, I trust this person, so I just call them up and get their opinion, and then that's how I'm going to decide what I'm going to do.
Right.
And I'm like, you trust them that much? Like $3,000 and they know your personal preferences that well?
Exactly.
Obviously, there are guitar brokers out there. There are guys that track down and do that stuff, but you're not going to use a $3,500 guitar. That's ridiculous.
No. Those brokers are out there finding the really high-end guitars.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know. I had to agree with him on a lot of the points that he made. And
I think his criticisms of the line are spot on. But I don't think, I mean, like, I just don't, I could give two shits whether people get their hands on the guitars at NAMM or not. Like, honestly, for the custom shop stuff. I mean, the production level stuff, the stuff that's actually going to be stocked in stores that everybody's going to be buying, like, absolutely. But let's face it, of Fender's guitars, Jim, 95% of them are not custom shop instruments.
You're absolutely right. But those custom shop guitars are also the ones that are being bought by, I mean, the end consumer. I mean, any of the ones that are considered relic are custom shop.
No, but then that's up to the shop to put it in your hands and to get you to buy it. Yeah. And that's you know, I get like the vendor proposition there. And you know what? They may have had pushback from their vendors or from the their dealers being like, you know, I don't want people touching my shit. It can go to my store and then I can control that. Like, I don't trust you to allow, you know, people to take care of these instruments when they're on the NAMM show floor.
Yeah. And the last point he made, which I didn't know because I didn't own it or even look at, I didn't even consider the last line of Fender pedals, but I guess the new line of Fender pedals is out. You got some more like that was news. And, but the thing that was interesting, and again, he said this is a step backwards, is that because the last line of Fender pedals were underwhelming at best. And to most people, and
it was so they had something in the market space.
I think so. And anyway, these new ones, they took away the battery thing. So they used to have a little battery thing. We could just, flip the battery out. Now you got to take the back off to get to the battery. And he was like, wait a minute, they had something good going here. At least it was one positive in the in the Fender pedal line. Yeah. And he went to say and see how easy it is. And then he looked and he went right on camera. He goes, oh no, they took them away.
You know what's?
You know how he is. He didn't say, "Oh no."
Oh shit.
Yeah. Oh shit or oh fuck.
Yeah. So hey, I do want to point something out because it's a good point. Like, that's the one thing that irritates the piss out of me about guitar pedals is that there are still guys, and I know Hammond enclosures and stuff like the typical pedal enclosures are readily available, and for small builders, like that's their only option in a lot of cases.
Right.
But can't somebody come up with a better system than having to have a fucking screwdriver every time you need to change a goddamn battery?
Yeah, every time. It's a Phillips head screwdriver and 5 to 10 minutes of your time.
And I have a couple of pedals. I'm not going to say what they are, but they're big enough to fit a battery in them, and they don't have a battery.
Yeah, that's the other one.
And I'm like, what? Like, I get it. You're going to save like a quarter on not putting that wire in there. It's mind-boggling to me.
And you've got to wonder if that's why Fender did that, because they're saving 15 to 20 cents on the thing.
I'm sure it's absolutely over that, and probably form factor as well. And maybe some of the circuits like didn't jive well because the boards had to be bigger or whatever. But that again, then they should have thought out a better design to do that, because look who they're competing with, right? So Fender's competing with, in the pedal market space, Boss. Yep. One of the big companies
at that price point, Boss,
and Ibanez to an extent.
Yeah.
And all of these companies have like a battery system that works better. Yeah. Boss does, and Ibanez does. I mean,
Boss definitely has.
Well, Ibanez, I don't know if they do anymore. They did.
Yeah, they did have that little flip. So speaking to that, and kind of in that range or in that thing, a lot of companies have gone from Korea to Indonesia. Now, I'm not sure if that's got to do with the tariffs and the laws, or if it's because they're changing contracts with who they were building their guitars with before, and they're going to court in Indonesia, because the court Indonesia factory is better quality than what they're getting out of the older Korean facilities. We got to get Pat on here to talk about that stuff, because he knows all about that shit. So one of the things that some people are ticked about that, and I'm like, I don't understand why. And if you like a guitar, then you buy it. It doesn't matter if it says Korea or
right. Well, we've talked about this on the show. Who cares about the country of origin anymore? I mean, honestly, it doesn't really matter all that much.
No.
And actually, in the case of going from Korea to Indonesia, I mean, a lot of companies actually saw quality increase from doing that, because the Korean facilities that were top of the line 10 years ago are no longer top of the line.
Right.
And when they were putting the infrastructure together, they saw the end of Korean manufacturing being like premium guitar manufacturing at a reasonable price. So they started putting their resources into Indonesia and China.
Right.
So
and they don't just, those who think that it's an easy move, they don't just do that. There are things, well, depending on the manufacturer, there are things that they make sure of so that their quality and their build process and their procedures and everything else remains
laser telemetry and all that shit to measure fingerboards and all the craziness that you can do to eliminate human error, because that is the one thing you got to remember. So the Indonesians aren't necessarily like super experienced building guitars the way that the Koreans were, because they've been doing it for the last like 15, 20 years. And so when they moved to Indonesia, like they have to make up for that with technology. But the manufacturing technology for this stuff is increasing so rapidly that, I mean, honestly, we're going to be buying Chinese guitars that are going to be freaking fantastic very, very shortly.
Yep.
And there's going to be almost no human hands involved in the production of them. I mean, that's even now, your bodies are still somewhat shaped by hand and stuff, even in some of these factories. You can see it. PRS is good for that. Like on the SE line, you can tell that no two tops in the SE line. I'm not talking about visually, but I'm talking about the actual like carve and the way that it's set against it. They're actually different. Yeah. I've had several, in fact, of the same color. We were looking at three different SE custom 24s, and they all had a slightly different carve. Yep. It was actually kind of interesting, because we were like, oh, I didn't know they did that. I was like, yeah, apparently they like carve them the same way that they do normally in some case, and the way that they sand them down is different. So I thought that was all done via CNC. Apparently it's not.
No. I think the only thing that's done CNC still is obviously your rough cut and your
I was just gonna say they're doing the rough cut CNC. Finer stuff is not.
So I thought that was interesting. So let's get away from the gear now, and let's start talking about music. So do you want the really hard ball or the kind of hard ball? Let's go with the
I'm ready to start yelling, so just get it over with.
All right, so Robert Baker was at it again. Now, I don't want to pick on poor Robert Baker. Again, anybody who thinks that Robert,
if Robert would like to come on the show and talk about his affiliation with the Tone King, I'd be more than welcome to have that conversation.
Yeah, me too. I'd love.
I want to know why he played on that guy's his song, quote unquote,
because he got paid.
Oh, he must have gotten paid. I don't know.
Because Robert Baker seems like a nice guy. He really
does. I'm sure he was like, "Yeah, I'll do it for you. It's cool."
And again, Robert prefaces all of his videos with you do what you do, and it's cool. And again, we agree with that. Well, I think I can speak for both of us when we say we can agree with that. But again, he put out with one of these videos, and I think it's because people like to see, for some reason, these videos about what not to do. And again, he went with another one of these what not to do, basic theory that beginners should avoid. Okay, and the first thing he's like, anything other than bar chord, or I mean anything other than open chords, the old cowboy chords. He's like, anything other than those, beginners should avoid, and cowboy chords only. And let me go through it because it's really quick. Because there's only four.
So I guess the Tone King is a beginner then.
Yeah. Well,
keep going.
Learn only pentatonics. So don't bother learning modes. Hold on, it gets better. Don't learn to read sheet music. That's a debatable one. We'll run back to these, and don't get intimidated. I actually liked this one. Don't get intimidated by other people who use the lingo. Like when somebody says, "Oh, I see you're playing an F sharp minor 11 there."
Yeah,
and you're
that
like,
part boggles my mind too,
yeah.
and it still bothers me. And I know a lot of theory, like that still bothers me to hear people say stuff like that.
Yeah, and I can understand that. With that one, actually, I was 100% agree with that one. So I'm going to talk about theory for beginners, cowboy chords only. I don't think I think you're leaving out too much. You're already
cowboy chords are the most useless fucking thing on the earth. You use them for like 6 months when you start playing guitar, and then as soon as you can learn to move chords around, you're like, I don't need this anymore. Exactly. Your fingerings are totally different too. Because like, even if you're going to use like the C chord, I don't know what position they would consider that, but like if you were to move that around the neck, like you're going to add a bar and all of your fingering changes. So it's just, oh God, man, like why are people giving advice about things that it clearly knows nothing about?
Well, again, here's the problem with anyone who considers themselves a beginner. If you consider yourself a beginner and you've been playing for like 8 months, you're not a beginner.
No, you're
not. Unless you literally have only picked that guitar up once
in that 8 months,
every 2 weeks or something.
If you're playing a half hour a night for 8 months, you're going to be able to tackle some stuff, like, and you're going to know more than bar chords, or you're going to know more than your normal bar chords for sure.
Yeah, and I think that by saying only worry about cowboy chords limits the person, and by setting limits, and I'm going to say this, I always believe, and a lot of people could argue with me about this one. If you set your sights low, that's where you're going to be. If you set your goals to, I want to learn my cowboy chords, yeah, okay. In 3 weeks, I can teach you all your cowboy chords. Matter of fact, in one lesson, I can teach you all your cowboy chords.
Yeah. And I've done that for people before. Yep. And that's why I completely look at that the wrong way. And I go, actually, no. I mean, the first thing I would teach anybody on guitar is a power chord. Literally the first thing I would teach you. If you want to learn you hear root fifth, interval like that.
That's right.
That's the basis of probably 80% of what you're going to end up playing at some point in your life anyway. So let's start with that. Then we'll talk about a couple of cowboy chords, but I tend to go for the ones like E major, E minor, and then like A major, A minor, because those are bar chords. You can use those in the same way. And then the next thing I show you is, okay, so now that you know that you can move these power chords around and make different notes, and you can do this, now you can play bar chords, and you can do major, minor, wherever you want. So you don't need to know necessarily like all the little intricate voicings and stuff. You can figure that out later.
You can also break out of the box of thinking that you have to always play all 6 strings or 5 of the 6 strings.
And that's the other thing is like the last thing you want to do is give a beginning guitar player and tell them, hey, skip that A string when you're strumming your D chord. Right. Like what? What? Because you're like you mean like I have to do this complicated fingering and I gotta strum only these 4 strings.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like no. What am I?
Exactly. So I had where I went to the Super Bowl party. One of my students from last year was there, and so he's kind of moved on and taking different stuff. He's kind of gone to self-learning, which is fine. And he wanted to show me some of the stuff he learned. And he showed me that riff, that Blackbird, riff that everybody knows. And I said, do you know how that works? And he said, no. And I said, well, I taught you your G major scale. So show me the G major scale. And then we're going to talk about why Blackbird works. And so then we played it. with the exception of a couple of notes in there, played a couple of times.
Just a couple accidentals.
It's G, right? Couple of accidentals. That is a G major scale. And so he goes, oh my gosh. And I said, yeah, play only the ones you're playing on the low string. Now show me the ones you're playing on the high string. Look, you just played that. And then I said, okay, when you're there, what is this chord? And then it was like light bulb moment. And then I took him up to his piano and I said, say, here's the same song on the piano. And then he goes, oh my God, I can play it on the piano and I can play it on a guitar. And it was just like literally like that. It was seconds to be able to take those two and put them together. The problem with when you learn stuff online, 9 times out of 10, I'm not saying that every online instructor is like this. They go sixth or a D string, 6th fret. Now D string, 8th fret. What did you learn from that? You learned one string in 2 spots, but what you didn't learn was where they fit in the song, where they fit in the chord you're playing over, and last but not least, you don't even know what the freaking notes are.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, so I guess we can kind of back up and kind of talk about what you should learn as a beginner when you start, because I've already kind of started to do that. But
right,
I think what you're hitting on is exactly that. Like this, there are basic theory things, and you can, and I think theory is a lot easier to grasp the more abstract you get about it. So if we were to step back and you were to say, okay, so we're going to talk about song structure, which is, partially a theory thing. Like beginners don't necessarily understand how all that works. Like they may not necessarily know that a chorus and a verse, are like, and about repetition and bridges and like how most music is structured. And even just sit and talk about, okay, so we're going to talk about some chords and talking about the various approaches that you can take using chords to structure a melody, where either, the chords support the melody, the chords are the melody, or in the case of like lead lines, like, and this is the one I was thinking about specifically for what you're saying, is like, I can either play through the changes, or I can play the root of the scale against the change.
Correct.
And like, those are the things that, those are very basic conversations that can happen that can set you up for a lifetime of how you learn the guitar. Well, and I have a lot of those conversations. I'm getting some of this stuff now.
Yeah, so. I will say that there was a lot of that when it was early on. There was a lot of that discussion of put your finger here, now strum like this. Put your finger here, now strum like this.
Yeah,
and it didn't come until way later. I was probably in my 30s. I think I've mentioned that before. Before a light bulb came on and said, "Wait a minute, that's a G chord too," and so what I wanted to get at is Blackbird is a prime example of how chords are used as melodies, because those are chords. Yeah, that's a chord melody. That's a chordal melody. And the other thing that I think that when players only learn, obviously the first couple weeks, I get it. You're a beginner. You're learning your cowboy chords. I get that. They're only good for a couple weeks. I mean, they can be good for your whole life.
The rest of your life. You do use it for the rest of your life, but
you should
not 90% of what you're playing.
Right, but they shouldn't be the only thing. You should be out of that box very quickly. But what I'm going to get at is the first thing that somebody will ask me when they want to learn how to play the guitar is, how do you solo over this? How do you know to play this over this?
Yeah.
And I say, well, part of it is my ear. It's trained enough to know these are the notes that go, because I can sing them, I can hum them, I can hear them in my head.
You can really blow their mind and go, well, how do you know that you want to play them?
Yeah.
Because in all honesty, like, who says that they have to be tonal? I mean, if you really want to get out there, you can play whatever the fuck you want against whatever the hell you want.
Exactly. I was just going to get to that. You can play atonally. Look, there are, you can look at Zappa's stuff and all day long and see some of the, the most atonal stuff I've ever heard that actually sounds good. But the point is that, so he tried to show me the solo to More Than a Feeling.
Yeah.
And I said, you kind of got it. I said, I see you're trying to do it. Yeah. No, I said, I see you're kind of doing it note for note, trying to do it note for note. So let me show you an easier place to play it and an easier way to finger it. And after I showed him that, he was like, how do you know that? I said, I played the exact same notes you did. I just moved them up here and moved them to another string. It sounds thicker and it sounds bigger. So those are things that we learn as time goes on. but you know, I almost thought, do you want me to come by for a few more lessons? You know, but I didn't throw that out there because obviously that sounds like somebody trying to pitch their product, and you know, and that's not what I was there for. There for the Super Bowl party. So, and you know, but my point is, if I was going to teach a beginner within a month, there's two things they would know. They would know the notes of at least you know, all 12 notes and how to get around them on the guitar. They would know their cowboy chords by then, and they would definitely know how to make power chords on all 6 pairs of string or 3 pairs of strings.
But the one thing that he gave out that I really take issue with is like learning music thing. And I know I don't know how to read music properly on guitar, but look, everyone should expose themselves to it a little bit. Right. It may not be for you, you know, but like just knowing how to read rhythm notation is super useful.
That's, believe it or not, I know a lot of people who can sight read that can read the notes and can't read the rhythm notation.
Yeah, rhythm notation's hard because nobody likes to sit around and count.
Yes. They're like, okay, how do I?
And the next time you're counting out a Metallica song, and you're like 1 END, 2 END, 3 END, 4 you know, like, what the hell?
Or you're trying to count a speed metal thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't even count that. Not even in your head can you count that fast.
No, you actually just try to break it down into the bigger beats, but
you're exactly.
You're like triplet.
Yeah.
You know, you're just thinking about the first note. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I remember the first time I was trying to play Steve Harris riffs on the bass. I said, okay, that's what that is.
Yeah.
It's just the sound of somebody starting a lawnmower.
Yeah.
So, there was I think that if you're going to, here's the thing. If you're never, and you can't say never, that's the problem. If you're never going to play off of sheet music, then sight reading is a useless skill. Yeah. But if you're eventually going to read sheet music at some point, now the truth of the matter is I'm sure it's going to happen because, as I've said before, I have a goal that goes beyond this. I've been working on my sheet reading for this my sight reading, I should say, for this very reason. I do 10 minutes of sight reading, and that is that, you know, I want to go to where I might wind up having to use it. But anyway, everything I've ever done, whether it was hey, Jim, I need you to sit in tonight, was always charts. It was always fake book charts. Was a melody line charted for me but I don't need it. I know the key, and I can look at that and I can guess what those notes are. I don't really have to know them. Hey, you know, that one's
that's how sight reading works anyway. You usually only know the starting note and then you just read along.
I go from there.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with guitar is that there's different positions, and so you don't necessarily know, like, okay, so I'm playing a low A, but like, do I play it on the open string and then play the or do I play it fret on the low E? And it really takes some planning because you have to look over the piece of music and go, do I go lower than that? You know,
like, do I have to go down from there? Where
do I shift? So I know a lot of people when they sight read, they'll look through a piece of music real quick and they'll go shift here, and they'll like mark it on the page. Yep. And that's not really sight reading because you're preparing. No.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, when you mentioned that, so the guy who taught me to sight read, this was about probably 16 years ago, when he was teaching me how to write a sight read. He, you know, first he showed me the staff, and I didn't get any of it. What's that flag for? You know, why are they? Am I supposed to salute there? And you know, when they put three notes together, it was like, oh, that's a triplet. How do you know that? So there was all this stuff, and then when he was talking to me about that, I said, how do you know that that's where I want to play a B? And he goes, well, you need to be able to. He literally just said what you did. He goes, you need to read like several lines at a time because you will never know where to put your finger. You got to know where you're going to be 10 10, 15 notes from now. Not what you're doing now, not even 2 or 3 notes from now. You need to know all the way down that page.
Well, I think the big challenge for a lot of beginners is sight reading, especially if you've never sight read for any other instrument. When you look at the thing, you go, I need to know each individual dot on the page what note that is. And you're like,
Yeah.
no, you just need to know what the space between that and what you're normally playing is. Like that's
Yep.
where you start, where that is. Like you need to know your intervals and your, you know, your relationships to the key. And then that's pretty much it. So,
And I would call intervals relatively beginner stuff.
yeah, no, you figure that stuff out pretty quickly, especially for sight reading. As I said, expose yourself to it. Like I obviously don't do it. And I feel like I feel like I'm misrepresenting what he's saying. Cause I'm like, I kind of agree in the same regard. Like I don't do it, but it's a useful skill. And I don't think any beginner should be told if they want to learn to sight read, don't do it.
Right.
Like that's ridiculous. Like if you want to learn to sight read, do it. Absolutely. It's going to help you a lot.
Absolutely. But if somebody tells you that tablature is a crutch and is garbage, they are full of crap.
Well, tablature from the internet is a crutch and a garbage because it's mostly wrong.
Because mostly it's wrong. That's like saying that most of the news from X, source is wrong.
I was looking at a song the other day and I was looking at the tab for it, and it was somebody had done it. So they did a tab like 10 years ago or whatever, and they posted it. And I was like, wait a minute. Like it doesn't modulate. Like what the fuck? And I just looked at the tab and I go, he's got like different notes being played here than what's on the song. Like totally different. And it's repeated over and over and over. It's like, do you even have fucking ears?
I had one where it insisted that they were tuned to standard and they were playing a full tone off from the.
Yeah.
And it even said what version of the song. I was like,
no.
Did you have this in a pitch shifting software and you didn't know?
Yeah.
Just saying. So yeah, that's when the crutch doesn't help. But tablature itself, as tablature existed long before the guitar. So, it dates back into what, the 1100s or the 1200s.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm trying to think how we should wrap this discussion up and just say, if you're a beginner on guitar, figure out what you want to do and focus on those things. Get a teacher. Don't get some lunatic on the internet like him who's got all these like countdown videos, 5 things you shouldn't do, 5 things you should do, 10 things, because all they're trying to do is cash in on YouTube.
They're trying to sell you, right? They're trying to sell you 2 things. They're trying to sell you views and they're trying to sell you their product. Every one of them. Tim Pierce kind of ticked me off. He had this clickbait thing. I clicked on it and it was like that. It was 5 things that. So I'm like, oh, Tim Pierce, that guy, he's really good. So I click on it and then it goes, it gives me like 2 of them. And then it says, for the rest, go to Tim Pierce Guitar.
Robert Baker's the same way. I signed up for his just to see, because there was like one thing I wanted to see that he did. And then like, as I signed up for it, like I start getting emails. I'm like, oh, fuck. Yep. Every 10 minutes, Robert Baker's.
Yeah, I get like 10 emails a day from Dave Walleman. And that kind of just, it's like, I get that you're trying to sell me your stuff, but realize that you sending me emails all day long, and it's yet another last chance to get your thing at 20% off.
The best thing you can do.
I wasn't fooled the first time. You're not gonna fool me 45 more times.
If you're a beginner guitar player and you're listening to this episode, first off, stop listening to this show, because we no, I'm kidding. Absolutely listen to this show, but get an actual honest to God instructor to give you 6 lessons.
Right. Even if it's just for a couple of months.
Not on Skype, with a dude in the room if you can. Because they need to be able to see your hand position and see what bad habits are starting to develop so they can nip them in the butt immediately.
Right. And if you don't like an instructor, don't stay with that instructor.
No.
Go to another. If you did this like a one-on-one thing where you're going to some dude's house, that's a different thing. But if you're signed up at your local music store, then go up to them and say, look, this teacher, I'm not going to be able to get anything from him. So I need somebody else.
The other thing I would encourage you to do is to actually have a conversation with your teacher about what your expectation is. What
are your goals and what are you expecting to get out of it? Because I'll tell you, so speaking of that, so Justin Guitar, Justin Guitar is a great instructor, great guy, is teaching Captain Lee from Andertons. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, Cap Lee did the best he could to tell Justin Guitar that I can't get anything from your lessons. I'm not getting anything. Because Justin Guitar has this whole online course.
Yeah.
And of course, I think he's trying to use Captain Lee as guinea pig. Hey, look at how it can help a guy that's been playing for X number of years. And Lee was like, I don't get it. I don't feel like I'm being helped with this thing. And I kind of felt bad, although Justin was very, very gracious and and that's exactly what he did. He said, I think where I failed you is trying to find out what your goals are. Because Lee is in the room with him. Used to be like once a week. Now it's like once every other week. And then it went to once a month because he was off. And that was the big thing. I mean, if you don't sit down with your teacher and tell them what your goals are, tell this person what your goals are, then that person cannot respond to you and know where best to drive you. It might be, I'm not the right teacher for you.
I think a lot of the time it has to do with the fact that, like, when a student comes in and wants to learn guitar, the first 6 lessons, and I always say 6 lessons because that's the critical period, like the beginning formation of what you're going to do.
Yep.
They don't necessarily know what it is they want to do in a lot of cases. And I know I was guilty of this when I started to play guitar, because it's like, oh, I wanted to play all the new metal stuff that was on the radio, right? And then, like, after about 3 lessons, I realized I don't want to play this stuff. Like, I want to play actual guitar. I saw my guitar teacher doing some stuff, and I was like, that's what I want to do, like right there. And it immediately just like jumped out at me. And I think when you do the cookie cutter lesson systems online, like your first 8 lesson, pack from whoever you buy them from, the problem is they don't tailor the material to you at all.
No, it's tailored to the masses.
And not everybody needs to learn the same shit or is going to be good at the same things. It goes back to our episode with Steve Stein. And I think that's a good way to cap this off. If you haven't heard the episode with Steve Stein, go back and listen, because we were all very honest. And Steve said, not everybody's going to be the guy that does a bunch of sweep picking and all the tapping and stuff, but he's going to be really good at this other thing. And that's how we should be doing this, is saying, okay, you're going to be good at this. Let's focus on that.
Right.
So.
Right. Absolutely. And the thing is, you can see, I mean, there's probably, if I said there was 500 of them, it might be too small of a number. Lessons online about the cage system, or, a million lessons about pentatonics, usually minor. Yeah. And you'll see somebody, and this is the problem. So we go back to what I was saying earlier, where somebody will go, okay, now I know my A minor pentatonic. Matter of fact, it was Captain Lee who was sitting with Justin guitar, and he goes, oh, this song is in A minor. Okay, so I'll use A minor pentatonic. No, you're going to use G. And then he's like, what? And then he did. Mind blown. Yeah. And honestly, I listened to Justin tell Lee why, and I didn't get it either. I was like, I don't get it either. I don't get. You're really not explaining this well. Yeah. And I'm not saying, again, that.
Well, he's using he's going modal with it, but that would have been the explanation.
Exactly.
Mode. Like, okay, then say that.
See, whenever
you're not in A minor because you're using a fucking mode.
You're using G. Yeah, exactly. And then he was trying to explain that it was I thought I'd use E minor over G, and then he goes, "No, you'd use this." And
there is another problem, because you just pointed something out that's very critical, and that is there are a lot of guitar teachers out there who don't necessarily know all the things they're teaching,
right?
Because there are different ways to describe that same problem, and we just hit on one. If that's really what he was doing, then okay, then you don't understand why it is that you're doing what you're doing. You really don't.
Right.
Because there's a much simpler explanation.
Right. I mean, he tried to get to the mode, but the problem is he doesn't really want to talk modes yet. And I think that again, you get to this Robert Baker thing. You're stuck in, all right, I'm not going to talk about.
You can't hide it, though. That's what kills me. Like, if you present a concept to a student and the student doesn't understand that concept, if you don't hide it from them, you say, this is a concept that we haven't touched on yet, but I'll tell you what it is. And then later on, we can discuss more about it. But you need to understand why this is what it is. So, it's like the same shit as when you're in school. When you're a kid, they teach you that the people came over on the Mayflower, when the Pilgrims came, and they lived in harmony with the natives.
Right.
And then when you're in high school, they're like, well, not really. I mean, there were some fighting and some arguing. And
then you go to college, and then there was bloody mass murder.
Yeah, and then you talk about Custer and like all that stuff, and you're just like, it's just like levels of complexity, and they come out of nowhere, and then they expect people to know this material, and they just won't.
Right.
So
absolutely. I think that's a huge thing, and that's why I think that as soon as you get to a topic, you should talk that topic, and not pussyfoot around about it.
Well, and if the student isn't asking about it, you don't have to discuss it.
Don't discuss it. Exactly.
Now I'm gonna play a real quick game with you, Jim. I'm gonna say guitar player's name, and I want you to say either good or bad, right?
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna tell you the answers, but Steve Vai,
he's good.
David Gilmour,
he's great.
Okay. So my point is those two players couldn't be at more opposite ends of the spectrum, but They're not doing the same things.
Nope.
And so to sit there and pretend like the path that Steve Vai used to get where he's at is the path that Dave Gilmour should have used to get where he's at is a completely ridiculous statement.
Exactly. And I can say that David Gilmour had been asked many times that I've heard, read or heard interviews with him. And people were like, didn't you ever want to learn how to, or why didn't you learn how to shred? And he simply said, that wasn't the style of music I wanted to play.
Yeah, wasn't interested in it. Like, and that's okay. Nobody's going to tell you that David Gilmour is not an accomplished guitar player.
Exactly.
More records than God. I mean,
Karen Carpenter didn't learn how to, sing heavy metal, but that didn't make her a bad singer.
But we as musicians have this tendency to look at people and say, well, every guitar player should be able to play everything.
No. And that's just it. You couldn't possibly. And I want to liken this. I want to liken this to knowing any kind of information. There's no way if you were an engine designer, that doesn't mean that you know how to design an engine that can get to the moon.
No, that's totally. You might know about car motors, but you don't know shit about a rocket.
It's exactly what I was getting at. And so, just because you know some information about a thing, a piece of knowledge, I can tell you right now, a brain surgeon is not the person you want working on your heart.
No,
he's not the person you want replacing your knee. I mean, they are such opposite ends of the spectrum. Someone who's studying cancer, is not going to be is not studying the common cold.
We're going really hard on this, and I want to stop for a second because I do want to point out, yes, there are fundamentals, and there's some of the things that Steve Vai does are the same fundamentals that you'd use as David Gilmour. Things like bending, sliding, certain scales like that. Those are all things that we all have to learn, and they're fundamental to learning guitar. And those are the things you're going to learn in your first 6 lessons, or your first 12 lessons, or your first 24 lessons, depending on how fast you practice and how much you practice.
Right.
So, except that there are some basics you'll need to know, but just also understand that like you can't tailor a plan.
No, because once you get
a style of music and everything like that.
That's the reason that the Hal Leonard method existed. So if you look at the Hal Leonard method, and I think there's 3 or 5 books of the Hal Leonard method.
I think there's still around too.
Yeah, they are not expected to take you past your first year.
No.
And when I first started teaching the student that I just got back together with this evening, I told him, I said, in a year, you don't need me. You don't need me. You need to move on because you need to then expose yourself to someone else and expose yourself to a new path. And it's going to be a path that's more honed in on what you want to do. And so that was what, and at that point I saw it. I said to him, next week is our last time to meet because you have learned what you need to learn from me. Now you need to go on and learn more. And it's not up to me to keep trying to drill everything I've taught you. It's up to you to take those and build upon them.
The other question I get from people who are beginners is, and I don't want to make this a beginner episode, so we're going to switch topics here, but
Right.
The other question I get from beginners is, how fast is it going to learn me to do X or take me to do X? And my answer is, well, how many hours a day can you practice?
Right.
Because that's what it is. I mean,
it really, yeah. I was going to say there's two things to it, and you hit the first one, nail on the head. How many hours a day can you spend practicing? The second one is, what is your what do they call it? Your ability to learn. Your
aptitude for learning.
Aptitude. Thank you. What is your aptitude for learning? Because if you're learning, some people, I mean, when they look at an engine, they can picture it taken apart and put back together the first time they do it. You always hear about that one person.
Yeah, and that's talent. You're talking about actual, honest to God talent, and it does happen, and it is a factor, because I've seen people who've played for 4 years practicing 2 hours a night who are terrible.
Yep.
And like, if I practice 2 hours a night for 4 years, I'd come in with new techniques. Like, I'd be like, all right, and it's not that I'm any better or worse than them. It's just because the way my brain operates. Right. And the way that my muscles develop is more suited to the guitar.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not that you shouldn't play. Obviously, there are probably a lot of players out there who are not suited to the guitar who are still playing. There's nothing wrong with it. If you enjoy it, you enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why those would be the first two things that would come to mind. You hear it all the time. I see it in other guitar post groups where people are like, I've been playing for a year and I still can't shred. And you've told me nothing else. You've been playing for a year. Have you been playing every day? Have you been playing 1 hour, 2 hours, 6 hours? Right. What have you been practicing?
Because if you're playing blues, they're probably not going to be getting in that neighborhood.
All year means that what they should do is practice shredding for a year. And I'm going to say this. You want to practice shredding. There's no question about that. You don't run fast by not learning to run fast.
Now, we've had this discussion before.
No. I'm not talking about speed now. I'm not talking about speed and slowing down. What I'm going to get at is you need to also be good at it. I've seen a lot of people who can play a flurry of notes that it's like, good Lord, this is so hard to
It's just yeah.
Because it's a mishmash of time and
right.
And that's the other side of it. That's when people will say, slow down a little. They don't mean to slow down like to think. They just mean slow down a little bit, get your timing, then speed it back.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, that's another big component of why you should have an instructor to begin with, is because
that's right.
Rhythmic timing is everything, and nobody seems to understand that anymore. I have seen some of the sloppiest rhythm shit and I'm being very, I'm critical of myself too. I have seen a lot of people who just don't give a shit about being on time.
That's right.
And how the hell can you play an instrument without not caring about time? That's kind of the point. Music is the organization of sound over time.
And if you're going to bend a note, please learn to bend the note tune.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go to the next topic, because actually Jeff Biazadecki.
I'll say it, Biazadecki.
I literally thought
he's probably going to call me and be like, you're saying my name wrong, you jackass.
I literally thought, because I thought is that his real name?
Yeah.
Because I thought that he was trying. A lot of people use made up names on like Jason Fuzzmonger.
The name.
Yeah. I thought it was Biazadecki. I thought that's what he was trying to do.
I'll make sure that he hears that.
Oh yeah. You point that one out. I literally thought that's what
he's like. Jim's a dick.
I didn't know that was a real name. No, I am a dick, but that's beside the point. I'm a total jerk. Nobody should like me. Believe me, nobody should like me.
Nobody does, Jim. It's okay.
Nobody does. I'm ahead of the power curve on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so but before I get to Jeff's thing that he posted on our group today, I wanted to talk a little bit, and I'm going to go through this stuff relatively quickly, because John Bott asked about protecting yourself against legal issues when it comes to ASCAP BMI. Well, actually, there's more than ASCAP and BMI. There's ASCAP, BMI, CSAC. That's SESAC. There's also PRO, and there's 3 or 4 PROs, probably more coming. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what those are and how you protect yourself. You don't have to worry about it. Done. Okay, so the next thing. No, because, all right, you do have to worry about it if you are, believe it or not, panhandling. If you're out there busking on the street and you're playing covers, you should know that you can be stopped for that very reason. That doesn't mean some cop's going to come up probably and stop you for that. You probably don't have a license.
I would think that almost no one has ever been hit for that.
Yeah.
But and actually, I know in like Chicago, we have a busking license.
Yep.
And if you have the busking license, I believe the city is actually paying the
ASCAP BMI. Yep. And so and that's typical. A lot of cities have busking. New York, I know in New York, if you want to busk in the subway, you're supposed to have a license of some kind for it.
I just hate that I can't I would busk in the suburbs out here, but I just hate that there's no place where you can go and check the law and see if they're going to come bust you or yell at you or.
Well, that's so I'm going to get to that during this. So ASCAP. So some people might wonder, well, how much does these things cost? Well, honestly, ASCAP is $365 a year. At least that was what it used to be. So it's $1 a day. BMI, though, is $166.50 per 50 people that can hear you.
Mm-hmm.
That can get pretty big. CSAC is relatively the same, and then there's PRO. All right, so PRO is this new thing, this new licensing thing. I don't know if it's too much in the States, but it does cover the States.
Performers' rights organization.
Right, performers' rights organization. And this is getting bigger and bigger. What this does is this covers everyone. We're talking actors, everybody. So let's say you go into a sports club or any place that you go that has televisions on the walls. This would be Fridays, Ruby Tuesdays, what's the other one?
I have television on my walls.
Yeah. Well, no, that's a different thing. You don't charge people to be there. All right. So I go to Applebee's, right? And I see how many televisions would you say you could see in any given?
Probably 12.
Okay. So now that's where the PRO comes from. I'm going to read this. And the PRO it covers radio and television, Spotify, DJs, Pandora, you name it. Not your jukebox. Your jukebox typically, unless it's a weird thing, most of your new jukeboxes, they pay their fee out of the money that you stick in them. Those electronic internet jukeboxes. Yeah. So the new PRO is the one that covers all those things. If you have more than 4 TVs in any room, what's a room defined by? Well, that's if you can see and it's not closed, it is a room. If the audio is in a room and has 6 or more loudspeakers, and any place that has outside transmission or transmission beyond a single location. In other words, if you have, Applebee's probably does this. I know most of the places
like Chili's and places.
Right. They have the same exact, you walk into a Chili's or an Applebee's at the same time of day, the same exact music is playing because it's on a loop.
Yeah, because satellite loop thing, yeah.
And so they pay a fee to have that brought in, and that is covered too. So if let's say they're paying which most of them do, they play. It used to be Muzak was one of the biggies. I don't know if they're still around doing that.
No, yeah, they absolutely are.
Yeah, and so you would pay Muzak, and Muzak would pipe your music in for you. They paid those fees for you. So imagine if you're walking by a club at night and you can hear the music outside. And it's because there's a speaker outside, not because somebody opened the door and closed the door. There's a speaker outside. They're supposed to pay a fee because that speaker is outside.
Yeah, the PRO is basically based on from what you're saying, it's based on the transmission of your media.
Right.
So
and the number of people that can hear it.
Right. And so, yeah, the complicated format. I don't know how that's gonna work long term, because it seems like it would be based on capacity, not necessarily the number of people. Because what are you gonna do? Eyeball it? I mean, honestly, like that would never hold up in court.
That's why one of the first things that you see when you walk into a place is occupancy.
Well, that's a fire code,
and that's fire code too. That's right. And as soon as they say they can have 150 people in there,
so that's how PRO charges. So they're not. So PRO is not like, oh, okay, there were 30 people at the venue that night.
No.
Okay.
You had 4 TVs in a room and 6 loudspeakers. So you owe this much money.
Yeah. Plus your capacity is this, so you owe this.
And your capacity. And BMI is all about capacity. They don't care about speakers.
Yeah.
ASCAP is just a flat fee. CSAC is a flat fee.
So BMI is licensing music for like commercials and stuff, though, right? I mean, that's not.
Yeah, they license.
That's not for like performing. If you're in a cover band, the bars are supposed to be playing ASCAP.
Okay, now that's where it gets hairy. So some stuff is covered by BMI, some stuff is covered by ASCAP.
And how do we know which the difference is?
We don't. So they should be paying both. The truth of the matter is, the minimum that a place should be, if you've got a pizza place and they've got live music in there, even if it's just a person sitting in a corner playing acoustic music, unless it's all original, they should have an ASCAP and a BMI license. And they should have a set list.
Yeah.
Of everything that anybody has played. So
I do know BMI is like a library, right? And that's a big part of what BMI is okay. So if you want to license, let's say you want to make a new Swamp Person TV show on Discovery Channel or whatever, they still have those.
And then you that's right.
License music, you're going to go to BMI.
The license. BMI.
Whereas ASCAP is supposed to be
for live
publishing rights and live performance type stuff. But I know there's some. It's like if you're basically the difference is if you're performing something that's through BMI, meaning something that's licensable as music for a TV series, something like that. Chances are, like if you're playing a TV theme song, then they need to pay BMI.
I was about to say. So let's say that you break into Welcome Back, Kotter. Or you sing Grease.
Really bad.
See, some of them it's tough. Saturday Night Fever. Oh wait,
definitely be on that.
BMI, Night Fever's BMI. Oh wait, but it's music, so it's ASCAP because it was on the radio. Which one is it? It's actually both. So some of them are covered both. That's why it's the best thing you're gonna. It's just not that much money.
Well, no, and normally for us as performers. Like Jim, you and I don't have to pay ASCAP or BMI.
No, and that was my point in the beginning.
The only time you had to do it is you're holding your own festival.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And those festival places, they're paying those fees. They've gone to their lawyers and stuff. So, what is important is that you provide. I made myself a note because you really should. It's very important that you provide a set list.
Well, so my understanding was that BMI and ASCAP consider themselves PROs.
Absolutely. They are two of the, there are like 5 different PROs.
Yeah, I know there's CSAC and then there's,
there's,
I think of the other 2, but I know who they are. I mean, so this whole idea of a PRO, and we were kind of, you were kind of talking about like that was a separate thing. It's really not. ASCAP,
they haven't.
There's different types of PROs, but there's a new one. And I think that is CSAC is the one that's like, oh, you got to have, or the it's a different
you've got Dancing with the Stars on the television up here, or you've got The Voice on, or you've got American Idol on, or whatever. That's that CSAC thing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. So I mean basically the thing to keep in mind, and to answer John Bott's original question, really just understand that these organizations exist. If you're not a member of one and you're publishing music, you should be a member of one of these organizations.
Yes. Absolutely. You should be a member of ASCAP if you're publishing music.
Right. And then they can actually, they provide services to assist you.
That's right.
I also know people who record music specifically for BMI licensing.
Yep.
And they literally it's all they do all day long. And then they hope that their stuff gets picked up for some TV series or something. And you're good at it, then that might actually work out.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, if you are a person that's writing music that you hope goes into a video game, or you're hoping goes into like you said, a television show or a commercial. I mean, I know people personally now who write music for commercials locally and nationally, and those, come on, you've heard some of the terrible commercials on television that get it, because they're trying to be as original as possible, because even if they're close to what sounds like a cover, then
they walk the fine line, and that's the thing. Like, there's a whole subset of these people that are literally just trying to rip off other people's music in just enough of ways so you know what they're doing, but like not enough to get sued.
Yep, in the style of. So,
yeah, they don't want to be Ed Sheeran ripping off what's that song that he ripped off that got him in trouble now?
I don't know. Was it he? I know he did something that sounded like somebody else. Yeah,
it was Marvin Gaye, but I don't remember.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Not.
Was it Sexual Healing?
That's it.
Yeah.
It's weird because the song, when you listen to his I thought, wow, there's Sexual Healing.
And then you play it back to back and you're like, holy crap.
Yeah. Oh, the first time I heard the Ed Sheeran one, I didn't even know who he was. I heard that. I went, wow, that guy sampled Sexual Healing. That's pretty cool. Sexual Healing. And then it went back and then,
I wonder what that settlement looked like.
Yeah, because Marvin Gaye's family went after him because I don't. That should be
We're not going to talk about their family. That's a whole podcast. That
should be a whole episode all by itself. Is family who, like Michael Jackson's family, Marvin Gaye's family, Jimi Hendrix's family, who had practically disowned him as a human being until he died. And money. Well, now we're in.
His dad had a lot of contact with him, and Jimmy was always trying to please his dad. I don't know what their relationship was like, but they got screwed out of everything. Like, regardless of how much they helped him, how much they paid his way when he was younger and stuff, like, they got nothing. and it took like 30 or 40 years before the rights was returned to the family.
Yep. So it's gone in opposite directions.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the family that owned the rights to what is it? Happy Birthday for years and years and years. Finally,
I don't know if it went back in public.
My understanding is that they lost that.
I think it was in public domain now.
Yeah.
So ASCAP, BMI, and other PROs, CSAC.
There's two other ones I can't remember, and I think they're European. So, I mean, for our European listeners, you want to look at what you've got out there as well.
Well, it's different from. Because you're going to find, like, if you just start doing your research and start reading up on these companies, you're going to find there's a lot of articles. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube, but you got to be careful because a lot of times they want to talk about you as the person who is licensing music, meaning putting music into them,
right?
Versus you as the person who is performing somebody else's music and what you should know in order to protect yourself. But really, you are not responsible for most of that. Like, that is the club's responsibility. If you come into a place and they tell you, well, if you're going to perform covers, we need to know what they are. And that should be the expectation. Like, you should be able to provide a list of songs because a lot of times they actually like to keep tally of what's been performed.
That's right. That way, if ASCAP comes in and says, hey, you've had people in here, what have they done? They can show them a list of songs.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm not saying that this happens, but we have heard of,
I know of one specific instance where a club was shut down because they were not paying ASCAP.
Yep. So you got to be careful, and you got to be careful to make sure that your set lists are legitimate. So that
$200,000 lawsuit that came out of nowhere from Atlantic Records.
Yeah, and it happens. So one final thing to talk about. So Jeff posted in our group. Not everyone here is remotely like this, but don't be a tool like this guy. Not everyone can afford Mesa Boogies or Marshalls or Friedmans or whatever. You might be doing the best you can with an affordable amp, or maybe he likes this amp. Tone is subjective. Gear snobbery is just getting out of hand. Nothing wrong with nice things, but looking down on others because they don't share your opinions is bullshit. And what he gave us was a screenshot from the Mesa Boogie fan club. Of course, the Mesa Boogie fan club is going to be a bunch of cork sniffers. Anyway, because I mean, you and I both like mesas, but we don't look down on people for playing something else. But still, anyway, we went to a bar last night. This guy posted in the Mesa Boogie Europe. Went to a bar last night where they had a cover band playing. Dude was playing a PV, and I could tell his tone totally suffered. You know, I love the guy that sits. That is the dude this dude Scott Gluckster. Scott Gluckstern. We're talking about you. Totally was just sitting there with his arm folded, like I could have done it better. He's the joke.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, they're usually the ones that, like, when you put them on stage, and they play like shit. You know?
And then they're like, "Well, that's not my normal guitar. I don't play out of this."
I'm more worried about my gear than my actual skills.
Yeah.
So, and I just laugh because I'm like, PV makes good stuff. I don't even today they make good stuff. Yep. I just don't. I mean, like, there are certain lines of theirs that I don't like, but I mean, I would go on stage with a lot of the stuff that PV.
Oh yeah.
Classic series. I've gigged them. What else? I mean, I like some of their solid state stuff. I don't like the Viper series. I do think the 6505 and the 6505 Plus are great metal amps. They got the new Misha Mansour head coming out.
Yep. I think that the what is it? The Blues something or other. They have one that's
the Delta Blues. Yeah.
The Delta Blues. Thank you. That's supposed to be like the DeVille or whatever.
It's just like it's supposed to be a Fender basement circuit. Yes.
Yeah.
Thing.
And they even look like them.
Yeah.
And of course we've talked before about the trans tube thing that they had.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, like, I don't know. I think when people, I don't try to judge a band by its gear. There have been times where I'm like, oh, we're in for a run tonight when I see guys carrying spiders. I'm like, oh, here we go. And usually that does pan out. But like, I've also seen guys that come in with like the cheapest solid state piece of shit, put two pedals on the floor, and then just rock the place because they know what they're doing.
I have a friend of mine who has played at NAMM, and he came in one night and was jamming at this club. We were hosting an open mic. He shows up and he puts down. This was to tell you how long ago. It was like one of the earliest pod boards before the HD5 or before the HD500.
It should have been the Pod XT Live, the original.
Yeah, the Pod XT Live. That's exactly what it was. Thank you. And he puts the Pod XT Live down, and he pulls out his Mexican Strat. It's got tape holding one of the things. He's down one of the pickups down, or where a screw is missing from his what do you call it, cover. It's totally covered in cigarette smoke from 100 bars that he's never washed. The fingerboard looks like he did it in oil, and he's got one of those like a felt thing underneath the strings at the end, because that there's
they're wobbling and
under the string here, or the nut starting to come. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be horrible. Oh, good Lord.
And then he proceeded to just
plugs in and he freaking kills. I thought Stevie Ray Vaughan was, he went, and then he just goes into it and he's ripping it up and he's tearing it to pieces. Then he does, what's the one? Voodoo Child.
Yeah.
Slight Return. And I was like, holy crap. Anybody who says you can't squeeze lemon out of that thing is full of it, because he was just tearing it to pieces.
So sometimes I was talking to Ryan Burke at 60 Cycle Hum in the group, and he was talking about there was a meme posted that it was like 2000 or 2003 or whatever. It was like the pod, and then they're like 2019, and it's like the Kemper on one side is like the same. It was the same guy playing the same guitar, but and he was like, you can't even tell it's not tubes in both sides. And like, it totally makes sense, because of course that's what's happened. It's what's transpired. But I just laughed, and I'm like, well, I the comment that in discussion we kind of had was like, well, everybody poo-poos the pod and says tubes are better, or like that tubes sound better or whatever. And I'm like, I kind of disagree, Because I'm like, it just
right.
really depends on what you're doing and how you use it. And really, I mean, now that I'm knee deep in the Helix, and this gives me a chance to transition and talk about my shit for a minute. Now that I'm knee deep in the Helix, it's become very, very clear to me that I have much more reliance on tubes from the mindset than I do from the sound, because I'm basically exclusively playing the Helix. I put together one really good patch, and I have a couple of other ones that I've been using, and I literally have not touched the programming on the damn thing in 2 weeks. And it has worked for pretty much everything I've thrown at it. It sounds decent. And I mean, yes, of course, I would rather have my Mark V next to me and whatever on stage, but this is convenient. And let's face it, tube amps are not convenient. I mean, if you're playing out and you're playing bar gigs, like, who wants to drag a 40-pound cabinet and a 20-pound head? It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
And for me, I mean, the difference in tone is negligible. I know people are like, oh, but it's not the same. Listen, I can tell there's a difference between the attack on the Helix and my real Mark V. There's an immediacy to the attack that you get on the real deal. But at the same time, it's like, can the audience tell? And is it really, if I practice with it, am I going to be convincing enough to myself that, like, I'll be okay? Absolutely. So that's where I think, people, and I hate, I know Brian may listen to the show, and if he does, then he can comment in the group about this, but I really strongly disagree with the idea that he put forth, which was that tube amps sound better, louder than modeling gear. And I think that that's totally subjective. I think it has a lot to do with how you tweak your patches. If you take the stock patches on any modeler and you turn them up to gig levels, they're going to sound like ass. If they don't already sound like ass because they're totally unrealistic anyway, versus, going the other way, which is to, like, take a patch that you really dialed in very, very well for high volume and turn it back down. So we've never talked about loudness curves on the show. I don't think we've ever, and I think we should cover it in the future, but I'm going to give you a brief overview. So the human ear distorts certain frequencies as things get turned up, which is why tube amps sound great when they're turned up, but down kind of flat when they're low volume. And it just has to do with a couple things. Number one is the speakers aren't pushed, and that's a big part of it. But that's probably 50% of it. The other 50% is just that your ear perceives the frequencies differently at louder volumes. And so the problem with modeling amps is because they're always modeling the amp at full bore. You really have to do some fancy stuff with the EQ in order to make it so that at a loud enough volume, it sounds proper. So what I've done, and this is something that I know other people have done, I may have already mentioned on the show before, is I created some EQ blocks in the Helix that I can copy paste in each patch that allow me to simulate what it will be like at loud volumes. I've simulated the frequency curve of the human ear. And
I want to talk to that for a second, because I think that's an extremely important point. Because when they create these patches when they're shipping these things out, right? Let's say it's a Line 6 Spider, and I'm not saying a Line 6
show off what the thing can.
Right. So the patches are, and this is admitted by any of the folks that build this thing. Let's say it's Frank Ritchie from Line 6.
Yeah.
He'll tell you that these patches are built to show off the thing. And it's built to show off to the person that's going to buy it. And do you think that the person that bought it, if it's a Line 6 Spider, they bought it to crank it?
Chances are they probably didn't. And so their target market for that determines what they're going to do with the power amp.
Exactly. They're gonna market it. Now, does that person want to crank it? Yes. And that's where I think that companies, whether it's Line 6 or Boss or whomever, kind of fail the end consumer, is they should say, you know what, as you crank it up, you might want to do these things to make it sound better, because that is always the complaint. You hear it on Andertons all the time.
And that's the biggest challenge of going to a direct in signal, is that people suddenly realize, oh shit, the same sound I use at my house doesn't sound good turned up because it's flat as hell at full volume.
Yep.
Or actually, that's not what happens. It actually gets exaggerated. It becomes like the super scooped sound that you absolutely hate. Really, you want a flat sound. That's what you want, because
Right.
it'll actually sound proper when it's turned up. It won't be the same, but and I part of my experience with the Helix is that I of course make this cabinet block. I found one. Somebody else had already done it for me, and I actually tweaked theirs because I was like, well, technically, they use the 10-band, and I was like, well, you can do it with parametric. I think that was a better option.
Yep.
But the reason why I think it's funny is like Line 6 knows this. They can design their device to do this for you.
Right. As you are turning up the volume to make that EQ curve change, because they've already modeled. That's the thing that I don't get. They model everything else except for what the master volume does for you. All they really think, I think that's where it gets left is that as the master volume changes, and I'm talking about that volume that changes the overall volume of the speaker. Unlike a master volume to other stuff, it does. There's other things that are involved. Anyway, when you're turning that up, they could model the effect of the master volume that would have been on a given tube amp.
Oh, they have that. No, actually, they do have that. the Helix has that. You have
the Helix has
you have gain. Some amps you have gain and drive, right? Like the Mark IV model has gain and drive, and they have a master control, and then they have a channel volume. And in addition to that, and by the way, the master control on some of the amps, you turn the amps gain down to 2, turn the master all the way up, and it sounds great. And what I think is more important is if I tweak the patch at bedroom level, I want the patch to stay the same at when I plug into a PA and I'm running it full volume. Now, the reason why I think they can't do this, and I think I solved my own question, is because the Helix doesn't know what volume it's being played at. It doesn't have a microphone in it. It's not now they could put a microphone in it that with dB sensitivity that would basically just read out, okay, it's 128 dB, change the EQ curve to this, because it's obviously so loud that
kind of like those microphones you get where you could plug it in, right? Those sound testing things. You're like, oh, what's the white noise, the ambient noise of the room, so that you can then balance your speaker system.
And that's another thing I don't like about the Helix is that there's no fucking metering in it at all. You can't tell how hot your signal is coming in or how hot it is coming out. So I have to use my DAW to actually I use Logic, and I put a metering plugin on it, and I watch the meter to balance my my volumes and make sure that my boosts have a 3 dB boost or 1.5 dB. And then the other thing is there's an input pad, and I'm just discovering this. So the input pad is a 5.5 dB pad for loud pickups. But the thing is, it's honestly sounds fine with even passives. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to leave this on then, because I don't know why the dynamic range is so squashed a lot of the times, but I hit that pad, like everything seems to be a little bit more dynamic. So obviously there's some magic to this. Like, I don't know exactly where their cutoff was for. And I think part of it is they probably just designed it so that, you're automatically going to hit the amp at this much volume. Like, that's just, that was a parameter they had when they were designing it. And they just selected this arbitrary number. But the reality is 5.5 dB down is probably a little bit closer. So I leave the pad on, and I found that even my fuzz face sounds are better. My the old Marshall sounds are better. They don't get as dirty as fast. Deluxe reverb sounds are better. It gave me a lot more flexibility in what I could dial in, because I wasn't pushing the amp so hard to begin with.
Right.
And that's the thing. Like, when I pick up a modeling amp, I want to be able to look at it, and I want to say, hey, these are the real world settings I would use on this piece of equipment, and put them into the modeling amp and expect it to sound the same way. Maybe I'm crazy, but I have never had that experience. Never. I think the Helix with the pad is as close as I've ever come to being like, okay, this is how I would set this amp up for real.
Right.
But I still feel like there's still some things going on in there that are kind of trumped up. And I've also noticed that there's a site called Helix Help where they have some discussions about. I guess it's run by one of the designers, but they have some discussions about suggestions that you might want to look at for how you're using Helix. And some of the things they talk about in there is the pad, one of them, and then certain amp models, like really they tweaked or they added a control, or they talk about, because there's a bunch of extra parameters. So we're talking about it. I guess I probably should just bring it up and read through some of the parameters and some of the models. But if you've never had your hands on Helix, so it obviously, I'm looking at the California lead, which is that's based on the Mesa Mark IV.
Yep.
It has a lead gain, a lead drive. This is that lead channel, by the way. Lead gain, lead drive, bass, mid, treble, channel volume, presence, master, sag. Okay, so
Yep.
how much sag the amp has, ripple, bias X. Some of them also have. In this case, you have the 5-band EQ.
Yep.
If I go and I look at, let's go look at the Plexi, like the Plexi Jump, right, which is both channels of a 100-watt Plexi. So you got bright drive, normal drive, bass, mid, treble, channel volume, presence, master, sag, hum, which is and again, this is why Helix Help exists, because some of these controls, I'm not sure exactly what they do. Sag, hum, ripple, bias, and bias X. I don't think that has them all either.
I know what sag is. I don't know what ripple is.
DC ripple.
Oh, okay. I know what ripple. Never mind.
How the low end, you can make it more flabby. You could make it more. You could tighten it up using the ripple control. And then bias X is like the X factor of what happens when you turn the bias up, and it's honestly like different for every amp. Some certain characteristics about the amp change. So actually, I found that a lot of the models, if you just turn hum, ripple, and bias X all the way down to 0, and then set the bias at a reasonable level, like 5 being normal bias, 6.5 being like a hotter bias for most amps, you can use that sag control to adjust the feel of the amp really significantly. And just being able to do that stuff and having that in a digital package is great, because this is stuff you can't do in a real amp. I mean, I can't. Well, maybe if you have a good enough tech, but I mean, I can't take a Mark IV and go to my tech and be like, you know what, the bias in here is fine, but I'd really like to have a little bit more tube sag, and I wish we could adjust the ripple, the ripple.
Well,
the tech is going to look at you like, do you want me to redesign it? Like,
yeah, exactly. I was going to say there are people who redesign amps to do those.
Oh, I know. I absolutely know they're out there.
I mean, that's the whole boutique amp market. I mean, is to say, oh, you know what? I love the way that Fenders do this, Fender Bassmen do this, but I want it to be able to do that.
Or just modifying amps. I mean, look, who's the Friedman? He's made a career out of modifying
amps.
And like, that's essentially the same concept, which is that, well, you don't like how it does this, so I can change these components and we can adjust this and this and that. That's basically what it is. So Line 6 just gave you fine control over those parameters. Yep. I think it would be cool if Line 6 came out with a software, like more an engineering side of software, not one that's really focused on sound quality so much as being able to lay out an amp, get a general idea of what that amp sounds like before you actually build it. Because I think that would be an interesting application of modeling technology, especially the modeling technology they have, which is component modeling.
Yep.
Because for number one, I mean, if you've ever gone through a build process for anything like that, it takes a long time to get it done anyway. And then number two is like, you're always kind of grasping at straws when you're dealing with a builder. You're like, I want a Plexi, but I want it to have a little bit more grunt, like a JCM 800, maybe a little bit more gain, and you can translate those words to them, but they're not exactly. It's not the same thing as him like saying, okay, so you want this and this, and he's like making notes in his head. And it's like, well, I can change these component values. But he doesn't translate. That's what he's doing.
Exactly.
He doesn't speak engineer. You don't speak engineer. So for him, like, or for the builder, it becomes this whole like trial and error process. And I know people who've had amps built for them, like with very specific requirements. Basically built on a platform that everybody already knows and loves. but then going through those requirements and saying, well, I'd actually like to have this added, and I'd have, I want to have this changed. And then they get the amp and they're like, no, actually, I'm going to have to send it back because it's not right. Like, it's not exactly what I want. And they go through this, this give and take for 6 or 7 months in some cases. Like, you could build that into architect software in like 20 minutes and then get a general idea if it's in the same ballpark, and then do it for real.
Exactly.
I guess the only variables that the Line 6 probably doesn't have, like, every model known to man, is like transformers. And a lot of amps, like, their big thing is their custom transformers, which is really funny because, like, I remember Fender, Rivera, and other companies, like, toting their custom transformers, but they're all ordering them from Schumacher Electric. So it's like, yeah, custom transformers, but, like, they're all made by the same company. So what's custom about it? Did you design the whole thing, or did you just tell them I need this many wines?
Exactly. I get a little bit, what's the word I want? I'm less than, what's the word I want? Impressed usually with, the fact that there's, first of all, the thing that we know about each and every amplifier that's got tubes in it is it's a little bit different than the last amplifier that you had.
Sure.
It has the same name on it, same model, same make. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but the differences are so freaking minor. Like,
They are.
But I get what you're saying, and it's a bigger deal when you're getting into hand wired circuits, especially if you're going hand wired high gain. Now, hand wired. I mean turret board, not on a because you can hand wire a PCB too. But turret board or eyelet, point to point, true, like, old school wiring. I've played a couple of high gain amps that are built that way, and they can have some really strange issues. Because things vibrate differently when it's not board mounted, and even the boards can vibrate. And the guy that James Brown, the guy that designed the 6505, which is the one of the first production high gain amps, was the 5150 when he designed it. He said that we spent months laying out the board because we had so many tubes in that amp, and it was so loud, and it was distorting in certain ways that they really had to be careful about, like, where this tube was in relation to the other one, to not introduce more noise into the circuit. And, like, when you start thinking about that level of complexity, I don't think, when you go to a Dr. Z, I don't want to use him because he is really knowledgeable. But, like, if you go, and a lot of these guys are, but if you go to like your buddy Joe, who builds amps for people, and he's built a lot of Seriatone kits before, for example.
Right.
He doesn't necessarily know that, if you put your power tubes within 3 inches of these 12AX7s running at this voltage, it's going to cause this weird distortion to happen because the tubes are vibrating in a certain way. Like, he may not know that, and
right.
That's an engineering thing. Like, that's totally an engineering thing. So, I think there's merit to like an engineer software, like I'm suggesting, but I think there's also, like, a certain level of variation that has to occur in the real world that you can't replace. You can't model that. I don't necessarily know that, Line 6, when they put together a model and they put their 12AX7 code next to another 12AX7 code with some filters in the middle, which are basically the caps and resistors.
Right.
That their code knows, like, they're not telling it your distance between this item and this item is this. Like, I don't know if it works that way, or if you can add, like, tail inductance or whatever from, like, where the board traces are on an amp or anything like that. I just see that getting, like, really infinitesimal really fast. So that's probably why that technology doesn't exist. But
yeah,
we've talked about this before, Jim. We as guitar players get really, really idiosyncratic and really, really anal about the silliest, stupid little things.
The smallest thing.
No keyboard player on earth would be talking about, like, what cleaner he used on his keys so that his fingers would slide properly while he was, doing glissando. Like that's just never that conversation would just never fucking happen because to them it's just a tool. Like we're the only ones that get to the point where it's like you got to have these cables and these strings and these picks and I know horn players and sax players and stuff like that or woodwind players worry about reeds, but I mean that worries about like super tiny detail.
I was talking to my keyboard player in the van, and he said he was talking about the gear stuff, and he goes, "How can you get so anal about this stuff?" And I said, he goes, "I just play."
I was playing with a dude a while ago, and I just got my Mark V 25, and we flipped it around, and he looked and he goes, "Transformers are fucking huge." And I just like. Yes, I know big iron is supposed to be a big deal, but he was like looking at it and he was like get out about it. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I'm not really sure that even really matters all that much.
Yeah.
It's kind of like we guitar players and everyone in this group and everyone that listens to this podcast probably knows somebody who's like this, where they get stuck on some little tiny fucking detail about something. Yep. It's like, I won't, it's unusable. And you're like, wait a minute. Like you mean because you don't have a 12 AT7 in the preamp slot 1, you're going to like flip out or, actually that's probably bigger than the kind of detail I'm thinking of. But like, back in the days when the Kinks were, like poking holes in their speakers or whatever with a razor blade and whatever they used to do to get those sounds. Like,
yep.
You mean you didn't cut that north-south? You cut it east-west? Like, what? Like, how dare you?
Man, I think I told you the story that there was a time when I heard people say, "Oh man, you can't paint your guitar that color. You got to use this."
Yeah, dude. Where people are like, black guitars sound different. Like, are you on fucking drugs?
Are you high right now?
Are you on drugs?
You sound high right now.
I mean, holy shit! Are you serious?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I've heard people say things like that. I heard somebody tell me one time, and I don't know if this is true or not. And even if it isn't, it's a great joke. And that is that Eric Johnson only plays guitars with black shirts on because black shirts make him sound better. And I honestly, with as idiosyncratic as that guy is, I would not be surprised if he didn't have that at some point.
If he at least didn't think that, right?
Like at some point in his career, he's like, it's got to be black or white and
psychosomatic.
Yeah.
Well, it's like a ball player saying, "Oh, I went the wrong jock strap."
We are the ball players of.
Yeah, we are
of musicians, and we worry about tiny little infinitesimal details that to the audience are basically useless.
Totally useless. How many, here's the thing to do this week. Walk up to somebody and tell them what gauge strings you use.
Yeah. And be like, what do you think of my new 10?
Yeah. Tell them, you know what? Do you think that I should get a Schecter or a Helix or what, or not Helix, Kiesel?
Yeah. Oh no, I would say Schecter or ESP or something like that.
Yeah. Schecter ESP, because I'm willing to bet you money
Charvel.
They don't even know what that is. If it isn't Fender or Gibson, I'm willing to bet you most of them don't know what that is.
No,
and the only reason they probably know what a Fender or Gibson is because they've seen it in every TV show that has music. I mean, Paul Reed Smith has been pushing that. That's why you're seeing more of them on television. Yeah. Is to get them more and more where people. I was at it. This actually happened. I auditioned for another band and I got picked up. Right. We'll talk more about that later, but not tonight.
Yeah, let that.
They were looking at my sleeve, which is the Paul Reed Smith birds, and I had the Paul Reed Smith in my hand. I kid you not.
And they're like, "What are those?" Musicians.
And they went, "Wow, those are cool seagulls." And I go, "What?" He goes, "On your arm, those are cool seagulls." I go,
"No, this is
this
is a hawk. This is
these are the same thing that are on that." And they kept saying, "No, you got those for the Chesapeake Bay Bridge tunnel, right?" because that's where I live near the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. I'm like, no, look, I literally I had the guitar in my hand. I put the guitar up like this and look, it's the same birth. Then they were like, oh, wow, that is the same.
Oh my God.
3, not just one person, 3 of them didn't recognize it, didn't see it. I'm like, holy shit, Paul, you need to make these things like the
Light
disco ball thing.
Yeah.
Just woo, woo.
So I don't want to, I've had this conversation before. We've had this conversation before. I'm sure we've had it on the show even. I always, say, oh, the fine details really don't matter all that much. But they do, because at the end of the day, like if it's a head game for you, or if it's one of those things where like you really do, feel something from it and an emotional connection or whatever it is,
then
like,
it does matter.
I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying understand that what you're doing sometimes seems ridiculous,
right, to other people.
Yeah, and even like in these amp models in the Helix, like the level of complexity they offer is often ridiculous. I can sit here and I can play with the ripple control while I'm playing, like doing chugging or whatever with one hand, and then play with the control, and I can't hear a difference sometimes. And I'm like, why is this even here? Why is this even here?
I know if I can go from 10 to 0 and back and I don't hear a difference in it, why is it even here?
Yeah, or the difference is so subtle that it's like I won't even care if it's on 10 or 0, like
but then again,
somewhere, I don't care.
Right.
There are times where it literally is so infinitesimal that you're just like, this doesn't really matter all that much.
What I want to say to people is whatever matters to you should matter to you. Yeah. And it's fine. It's great. And whatever gets you to play or gets you to create or, whatever your goals are with the instrument, that's fantastic. I think that's what we as musicians should strive for. It's the person, what we were talking about is this person being a dick, just outright.
Yeah. This guy's like, you suck because you don't have a Mesa.
Yeah.
Like, grow up, dude.
Yeah. He didn't say you suck because you don't have a Mesa, but he was like,
no, that's what he was implying.
Right. Again, I've met people with fantastic gear who suck.
Do I suck, Jim?
I do.
You don't suck. You're not bad. Like,
if I'm not bad, then you're freaking awesome, because but I have my issues. And as long as I'm my own worst enemy, or I shouldn't say my own worst critic, I will always.
Well, you keep getting all these auditions and then getting the thing. So I would just shut your mouth and realize that you're not as bad as you're making yourself out to be. Somebody must like it.
Somebody likes it. At least but if I'm the kind of person, if I thought I was good enough, I wouldn't put any more effort into it. So
the truth is, let this be a lesson to you, Jim. Like, if you're not a great guitar player, you must be a really damn good singer. So, you know what I mean? Like,
and since I didn't do any singing in this other band,
so that should tell you something right there.
I'll tell you. Yeah. And you'll get, what'll happen though. Somebody like Scott Gluckerson is going to say, yeah, but you weren't playing hard songs. You should play the stuff I play. The really hard stuff, man.
I do play really hard stuff.
No, I'm talking about Scott Gluckerson.
I know, but I'm just like laughing because I'm like, dude, I play shit that like people think is, I can play this. And then you listen to him play it and you're like, here, try this with a metronome.
Yeah.
And they're like,
we should, So for a future episode, guys, I'm thinking that what I want to do is talk a little bit about that. Is the place that you sit as a musician in the thing. I think we talked about it before, but I don't know if we've really nailed that on the head. Is that
to understand groove? Like we can do a whole episode where we talk about groove and mechanics.
We can even slide in some playing in the background.
I'm finally getting to the point where I can actually hear when I'm playing in, along with the song, I can hear where I'm at within the groove, which is something that I was always able to do it after I'd recorded it and listened back, but I wasn't ever able to do it in the moment very well. But now I'm getting to the point where it's like, ooh. But I'll tell you what, I've been, you and I had this discussion offline, but I've been learning Cult of Personality and like to get the proper way.
Right.
And, that's a song that like, if you don't have that groove down, like you will. I mean, the only other song I can think of that's like that is Walk from Pantera. If you don't have that groove down, like it shows. So I can play it. I do not play it because I do not sound anything like the actual record.
I'll tell you, I salute you for recognizing the fact that if you don't have that groove down, I've heard people say, first thing that when somebody says, I want to learn some easy stuff, people always, AC/DC, man, you should learn some AC/DC.
Yeah, fuck you.
Okay. I'll give you that there's probably never been an AC/DC song with more than 5 chords.
Yeah, you could get all those 5 chords, but can you play them in time?
Can you groove it? Let me tell you something. A band that is literally just an acid rock, band they are some groove in that.
When I listened to Back in Black, and I bought it when I was in college, and my mom heard me listen to it one time. She's not versed in any sort of rock and roll, really, like pop music and mostly country. Most of her adult life, she just completely missed out on things like AC/DC. She heard me listen to it, she goes, what? So what? When you listen to this, she asked me, what are you listening for? And I said, do you hear the rhythm section? I said, the drummer and the bass player, there is no difference between those two guys. And if you listen, like they are completely solid. That's groove right there.
Yep. Probably one of the most rock solid rhythm sections, that comes out of that style of music.
Yeah. And I'm not saying like, look, obviously what they're playing is not complex.
No.
But
and that I give.
The fact remains that some of those bands like Dream Theater and stuff do all this super complex, complicated shit. When you hear them play something dumbed down like that, and there are covers out there, you can go listen.
Yeah.
They don't have they're not in time the way that you think they would be.
No.
It does not sound like a band that swings like that.
I remember the first time that I was, Girls Got Rhythm is a song by AC/DC.
Right.
And it's got this and that comes in there.
Yeah.
And I want to say it's like
it's halfway to a triplet.
Yes. Thank you. It's almost a triplet, but it's not quite. And so if you ever listen to it, it's got that feel like, okay, we're going to hit it now. And then we're going to hit it now. And so it's not always like 1, 2, it's not 4/4. People are like, and you can hear the kick. It's like, and you're like, oh yeah, it's a 4/4 kick. So it's got to be a 4/4, and it's not. And everything it's a polyrhythm over a 4/4, which again, people are when they go to play it. So when he goes to the part where he starts riding when he does the cymbal ride, and you hear the cymbal ride crash, ride crash, ride crash, you realize, like you were talking about, the kick and the bass are so locked in, you swear to God that's one thing. Like the kick drum is literally hitting the string.
It sounds like it's triggering the note. And part of that is they're gating their side chain gating it. But I mean, you hear them live and they're so spot on compared to the other band that does that really, really well is Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
There's some stuff, and actually the Police were very good at it as well. Murder by Numbers is the song that I think of, and I'm like, holy hell.
And speaking of Pink Floyd, you've got Allman Brothers, Pink Floyd, and a few other bands that had, I want to say 38 Special, that had 2 drummers. It was a big thing back then.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. You ever played live with 2 drummers? They got to be in perfect sync. It is not like when you
cannot take 2 drummers who are not good and put them on stage together and get something meaningful out of it. They have to have their shit together. They
have to be dead on. It's not like having a conga and
because everything's not saying play them if you don't.
I'm not saying that a conga isn't difficult or something like that. I'm saying that there is definitely a I've seen that mashup, the Living Color, Back in Black.
No, that's not a mashup.
Oh, that's them doing it?
Yeah, they do a cover.
Oh, I'll have to watch that later.
Yeah.
Back in Black's another perfect example of that. That's almost, I think that just was their style of playing, was that that swing feel. And I think that's why people can dance to stuff like that, where you couldn't, which I think, helped their popularity. If you can dance to it. Kiss was kind of that way. They had a thing. A lot of people talk again. They'll throw Kiss around. They'll go, "Oh, the easy stuff, Kiss." Okay, I want to see your band do Detroit Rock City, and suddenly you go. I'm not saying it's not that the chords aren't easy. The chords are dead simple.
Well, we've talked about this before, and when you take something simple, that removes all margin of error.
Yep.
And you can't fuck it up. I was laughing because I was learning some Gojira turns last week. And their stuff is not, I mean, it's just like metal brutality stuff. But when you look at a tab for or whatever, and they list it as like beginner, and then you're like, beginner my ass. Like, seriously? Because like every note is perfectly in time. That shit sounds so time aligned, but it's not. Their last record was done in like 3 days. So it's like, there's no way this is timeline. This is a band in a room. And you're just sitting there going, how in God's name do they think that, that this is beginner level? Like you're totally doing yourself. You might be able to play the triplets, but you're not actually playing the song properly,
Right.
So
I take myself to Iron Maiden when I think about people who play complexity in perfect time.
Yeah. I don't know. Even Iron Maiden, like when I listen to their records, like I can hear the hard left, hard right panning. And a lot of times I can hear like Dave Murray's a little off or something. But for the most part, the rest of the band's totally in sync. Actually, I think Steve Harris gets off quite frequently too, but it's not bad for the music. Like he's doing it in a way that like a bass player will when they kind of back off on the kick, because they control that. And that's what I think as a beginner guitar player, a lot of people don't realize is that they control that groove. Like they can lay back and not play on it. When you hear somebody who's really good at that, go listen to anything where Steve Vai is showing phrasing and watch him do it because he's a master at it. And it's scary as hell to think like, oh, he just played that note behind the beat. Like, how did he know how to distance himself from the beat? So he's thinking like to the point where I'm just going to be slightly off the beat, or I'm going to be a lot off the beat, or like, and you start thinking about the subdivision. You're like, it's hard enough just to deal with standard note definition, Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So. And going back to Iron Maiden, Nico refuses to use a double kick.
Yeah, I know.
So a double kick pedal. So that guy is doing that with 1 foot. So, anything after, what is that, Peace of Mind when he started drumming? So you can tell when he took over the drumming of it. And he is a very, he comes from the Led Zeppelin style of.
Yeah, but it's a band that like I've never really been super fond of the drums for that band. I think it's because they just fit in the groove real well. Like the drums aren't stand out. Like I listened to who's the band that I was thinking of having a moment, and it's a popular band right now.
Who?
Mastodon.
Oh, Mastodon.
That drummer, I forget what his name is offhand, but he is a monster. And when you listen to that band, like that's the first thing that pops out of you is the damn drums. You're like, holy hell! Like, where did this guy come from? And he's also a singer for half the damn songs too, which makes it even more screwed up. Granted, they're not as good live singing as they are on the records because they obviously do multiple takes and stuff. When you consider every guy in that band sings at some point in the show, and like they're all doing different things, and music's super technical and all that, and you hear the drums going, and you're just like, you don't get that same feeling when you listen to Iron Maiden. Like the drums aren't like popping out at you like, hey, let's take you by the throat, show you how much like complexity is here. But as I said, the devil's in the details. Playing single kick, and the other guy that was good for that was Phil Collins, would play all that crazy progressive shit like Brand X and all that, and he was doing it with fucking single kick.
1 kick,
Yeah, he didn't start using double kick until like super late.
But if you really want to see what Nico can do, listen to Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner when they're switching up their time signatures completely. And he goes from playing a light, really thing, and I know that he's not Neil Peart.
No, and that's not what it's saying. Like he fits the song better. Neil Peart pops out like a sore thumb every time you hear him. You're like, oh yeah, all right. That's
Neil Peart.
Yeah, right. Like
I saw an interview with Alex Lifeson. Before we go, I want to say this. I saw this interview with Alex Lifeson, and he was talking about Neil Peart, and he was doing this thing called Rush. And it's Behind the Vinyl is this little thing that they got.
Yeah.
And they're cool little short videos. So if you ever looked at Tom Sawyer Behind the Vinyl, it's pretty cool. And he goes, you know, you can tell he didn't really want to do it. He's not. Alex isn't really a big speaker.
He doesn't really like to do interviews at all, frankly.
No, yeah, he's the second worst in the band for doing interviews. Neil being first, who doesn't do any unless it's a drum interview and it's anyway. So he's talking about how Neil. He goes, yeah, Neil is playing this stuff like this. He's so good and he does so much in there. He goes, if I was the drummer, I'd be all like this. And his hands are just moving slowly like this. And he goes, and he's so lazy. He goes, that's why I play guitar, because I'm so lazy. And then you see him go, I'm getting better.
Yeah. And I believe every word of that.
Yeah.
So we've given you more than enough episode for tonight.
Yes.
I don't think there's anything we haven't butchered and said something
or destroyed
about or destroyed or so all things are what they are now. I have been David.
I've been Jim.
And tonight we have been the Practical Guitarists.